Movies aren't just a career for filmmaker Martin Scorsese, they are an obsession. He and his pal Steven Spielberg are in the forefront of trying to save some of America's early motion pictures that are crumbling before our eyes. More than half of the films made before 1950 are gone, he says. I don't know how we'll catch up. We're trying to have a systematic form. More than half of the films made before 1950 are gone. I don't know how we'll catch up. We're trying to have a systematic form, says Martin Scorsese, who is teaming up with Steven Spielberg and Universal Pictures to restore old films. Victoria will envision, the Associated Press. Part of that form is his work with the Film Foundation, which he founded, and a new agreement with Universal Pictures. They will restore a hand-picked collection of Universal movies, including 2 versions of Ernest Hemingway's The Killers, My Little Chickadee, Destry Rides Again and Winchester, 73. Scorsese says he first became aware that film had been manufactured on an unstable cellulose nitrate base when he attended a 20th Century Fox retrospective at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. They were showing all nitrate studio prints in black and whites, and they were glorious, he says then. I went to see Niagara and the 7-Year Itch, and the prints were pink. You could hardly see the eyes. You lose all the expression and emotion. That's when I first realized, article continued below, the nitrate base is not only unstable, it's highly flammable. Through his Film Foundation, the 75-year-old producer-director has been leading efforts to convert the fragile resources to a more stable matrix. Scorsese was born in New York's Little Italy, and he remembers his first movie, and his first cinema crush, Duel in the Sun, when he was only 4. For the man who made such classics as Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, Goodfellas, and Casino, filmmaking has always been about learning something. That's why he champions the works of some of the more obscure filmmakers. But for him, the 3 American movies that influenced him the most were On the Waterfront, Citizen Kane and John Cassavetes' Shadows. There are foreign films, too, he adds. The 2 that come to mind, for example, are 8½ and The Red Shoes. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I saw neo-realist films. And they also influenced me a great deal. One of his failings, he says, was avoiding silent movies. I disregarded completely silent cinema until the late 70s, early 80s and mid-90s, he says. Now the silent images of artists like D.W. Griffith, F.W. Murnau and Frank Borzage fill Scorsese with admiration. Article continued below. He says he's trying to introduce younger filmmakers and cinema fans to the early masters and to some underrated B-movies. The problem is budding movie buffs have little concept of the past, he says. I talk to some student groups sometimes. I'll mention Sweet Smell of Success. I'll mention Andre de Toth, and I'll mention John Ford's Wagon Master, and suddenly I realize they don't know what I'm talking about, and so I have to say, okay, how many here have seen a de Toth film or Jacques Tourneur's The Cat People? And you find that, unfortunately in many cases, film history starts with maybe Forrest Gump. Maybe. But I said that yesterday, and I was told, that's too early. He smiles. I mean, looking at a film like Tay Garnett's Her Man is a revelation in terms of the early 30s and the myth of the frozen camera. Originally, the camera had to stop and be static. In many cases, like Anna Christie and certain films like that, that's true because they had the microphone in a certain place and had to speak into the mic. But with Tay Garnett's film, Her Man, and another film called Prestige, the camera moves in a pretty interesting way in a number of shots, so I'm always amazed to find what comes out of American cinema. The silent films of Frank Borzage, for example, are a revelation, really, when seen in the right way. Most people would be surprised to learn that the grand-scale Hollywood spectacle is one of Scorsese's favorite genres. I always admired the big epic films like The Ten Commandments, Ben-Hur and, to a certain extent, The Robe, he says, so that was the kind of picture I wanted to make, he says. After more than 40 years, Scorsese has delivered such movies as The Color of Money, The King of Comedy and The Age of Innocence, more character studies than sweeping sagas. I'm predisposed to these spectacles, he laughs, and when I started making movies, they're all close-ups.